Okay, so we just talked about, the causes of World War II, the failure of the League of Nations after World War I from a liberal perspective. And now we're going to talk about how a realist would view the situation, or a realist explanation of what happened, why we had another terrible war like we did. And so, of course, the realist always looks at the situation in terms of a struggle for power, a balance of power, right? What's happening there. And of course, they have certain, ideas about how states behave. So, from this perspective, the realists see that the situation with Germany was never resolved, right? So the German situation that led to World War II was really just a continuation of World War I. So they believed that pretty much the League of Nations was going to be a failed project from the get-go. And mostly that's because of how they see the world, right? They think that a balance of power logic that runs the world simply cannot be canceled out by international institutions. So to them, security is the main reason why states exist, to bring security to their people. So therefore, the very idea of collective security is a failure to them. And here you can kind of see why that is, and they believe, and it's a reasonable argument when you look at what actually happened in the League of Nations, but they believe that collective security, maybe it sounds like a good idea if you're not a powerful state, because then you get the benefit of the powerful states, right? When it comes to threats to you, people will defend you. But the idea is that powerful states don't necessarily have much to gain. So powerful states will only be restrained in what they do so long as they think it's in their own national interest. In other words, this little picture here to the right of the League of Nations, right? It's Uncle Sam, right? That's, a symbol of the United States. And so the idea is, why would the United States join an institution in which the U.S. would have its hands tied behind its back, so to speak, right? That's literally what they're showing. So the idea is, if you're powerful, why are you going to have your hands tied behind your back, right? And why are you going to take on the problems of others in such an extreme way? Now, the truth is, as time goes on, the United States will see that it's actually in their interest to lead the world, but not through something like the League of Nations, right? It was from a realist perspective, it was way too restrictive for it to actually work. Okay, so a realist account would look at some of the things that you're used to hearing about with World War II, right, in Germany, in a particular way. So we've all heard that the Versailles Treaty, that the treaty that was signed with Germany after World War I, that it was one of the causes of World War II, right? And so the idea is that because it was so punishing to Germany, that, Germany suffered so much that they just wanted to rise up. So we do know that Germany was punished, and that they lost territory, that they lost colonies, that the Versailles Treaty really did try to reduce German military power to a great extent. And it was the idea that Germany was guilty of aggression in the First War, and that they must pay reparations. The truth is, from a realist perspective, though, all that did to Germany was make its security situation worse. So from a realist perspective, they had a built-in incentive to try to expand and to get back some of the territory, and to build up their military again. So from a realist perspective, Germany was being punished. At the same time, you have the existing underlying struggle for power happening. So there were still military alliances that were at work. So Germany still had to think about France, right? The idea was that there were allies that were encircling Germany, therefore creating a security dilemma for Germany. So in other words, Germany was not meant to feel like their security was going to be guaranteed in this so-called New World Order, right? So they felt like, they had to go it alone, and when they had to break the agreements that they did and build up their military power. from a realist perspective. So what Germany does is they turn to the Soviet Union, the USSR. And so they established full diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union. And the truth is, it's kind of like, a shared interest, even though they weren't necessarily friends. The idea was that both of them had an interest in challenging the post-World War I order. And so from that perspective, it was purely a move for Germany's security, right, and the USSR as well. So they had, for example, certain treaties to guarantee their western borders, for example, with France and Belgium, but their eastern borders were not guaranteed. So they went out and made their own agreements. So the idea was, well, what does Germany do when they feel insecure? Well, they expand, right? So Germany pulls out of the League of Nations, begins to expand, and here's a little map that kind of shows you, exactly how they expanded when. So they went to the Rhineland, to Austria, Sudetenland, and Poland, and of course, we know what happens, right? The idea was that they would just keep expanding and